Welcome to They Live by Film, a film discussion podcast focusing on the Criterion Channel and beyond. My name is Adam Lundy, and I am joined as always by my co hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. Hello, how are we doing?
Great.
Good, good. How are you?
Yeah, can't complain. It's Sunday, weather's nice, just easy breezy at the moment.
I like Kino's little slogan, the spring forward, I think, right? From March into April. So happy spring, y'all. We're in April now.
Yes, hallelujah. Long day. As much of a grief daylight savings is for like your sleep schedule, it's just so nice having as well. There's a common phrase in Ireland called the grand stretch in the evenings, and that's what we get now with daylight savings. You get that extra couple of hours of brightness, so you get that grand stretch in the evenings.
Oh, okay. I
So
like
I
that.
like that. Yeah, it's a very everyone in Ireland knows that phrase. It's been said so much it's kind of like eye rolling when someone says it. It's like yeah, someone said that. Someone said the word, the meme phrase. But yeah, grand stretch in the evenings.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Um
make sure I say it whenever I visit Ireland.
yeah.
Just try to do an offensive accent too, Zach. Is it like sort of like that time after dinner? Is that what it is? Like
Yeah,
you're
exactly. It's just that extra couple of hours in the evening
yeah.
time, after dinner. Instead of getting sort of dark at 5:30, 6, it's now still bright at 7:30, 8 o'clock. So if you wanted to go out for a walk after dinner and stuff, you
Yeah.
have that option.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just yes, that's that sort of longer stretch of brightness after dinner time, basically.
Well, it's funny that we're talking about the grand stretch of what is it? The grand stretch of
Grand stretch in the evening.
grand stretch in the evening. I feel like that's sort of appropriate in Giallo week or Jolly week
Yeah,
because
it does sound like a title you would hear.
yeah, it could
Add
be
an animal and
Giallo.
some numbers.
Yeah, exactly. If you throw an animal in there, you've got a
The
good title.
grand stretch in the evening of the 17th bird. Some shit like that. Yeah, well, I suppose the cat's out of the bag. No pun intended as well. It's probably another Giallo title, Cat's Out of the Bag.
Cat's out of the
Um,
nine-tailed bag.
yeah. So yeah, this week is Giallo special. We're gonna be talking about probably like two of like the top five, probably top three, like Giallo movies ever made, which is pretty cool. Um, which do we want to get started with? We never talked about it when we were prepping. Any preference on where we start?
Well, the good thing is I can say both the directors' names, so I'm good on that front.
Well, I'll choose then. I'll choose since I go first. I'll choose where to start with. So, the first film we are going to talk about is probably it is more than likely the film that kicked everything off with Giallo about 5 or 6 years before it really kicked off, and it is Blood and Black Lace, also titled Six Women for the Murderer, which is that's a proper Giallo title right
Mhm.
there, by Mario Bava from 1964. Just to give you a really brief overview, if you haven't seen it, a masked man with a metal claw glove stalks models at a couple's fashion salon in Rome. Simple as that. There's nothing too convoluted with this film. It's very at the same time it is quite visually abstract. So I suppose we'll just start off. Who wants to kick it off with something basic? Did you like it? Didn't you like it? We think we've all seen this before. This is all. None of us was our first time on this, were we?
no, I don't think so. No.
I think for both
Yeah,
of these movies today, Zach,
yeah.
why don't you go first this time?
Okay, so Blood and Black Lace. I did not get a chance to rewatch it. I thought I had considered it. It's just been, if anyone who's on our Patreon will know, my hardships this week have not allowed me to actually watch it like I wanted to. But I remember it pretty well. It's a incredibly visually stunning movie. In a lot of ways, I would say this is sort of the Psycho for the slasher film in a sense, like that idea that Halloween was the one that kicked off the mainstream appeal. Psycho was kind of the first domino of that. There's a lot in Blood and Black Lace that has a lot of Giallo elements, and then there's a lot that didn't quite carry over to what I guess we would think of as the stereotypical Giallo. And
Mhm.
being early on, that makes sense. It wasn't like Bava was sitting here saying, okay, what's the tropes? What's that? He's kind of creating a lot of them as they go. And that is something to really have an appeal with, something that's really interesting from a historical sense. And like I said, as far as they go, probably one of the most beautiful looking Giallo films you can find. The story is not. I mean, Italian Giallo films aren't exactly known to have great stories. This one's even kind of lower than a lot of them. It's not very interesting. I couldn't tell you much about any of the characters. You're not really there for that. I like the movie. I really enjoy it, but no, it's you watch it for the visuals. I don't think you watch it for the story at all.
Yeah, for sure. I like that Psycho comparison in terms of like the foundations of a genre. That's a good comparison to make. Yeah, I totally agree with the story. I did get a chance to rewatch it, luckily enough. I didn't really care that much about it the first time I saw it, which is about maybe 18 months ago, maybe pushing 2 years. It was good. It was a good time ago. I don't remember exactly when, but it was a while ago when I first watched it, and I was like, oh, that's it. And, that was, yeah, it looked nice, but I didn't really care too much about it. Thought the story wasn't very. There wasn't really much of a story, which is still true. But the rewatch allowed me to focus less on why things were happening and more on what was actually happening from a filmmaking point of view, the visuals, composition, the atmosphere, the costume design and the set design, especially as well, the lighting. It's pretty much it is a visual treat. I know there's a phrase that's used when people describe Suspiria called a candy colored nightmare. And I think that can also be used with Blood and Black Lace as well. It does obviously use a lot of bright primary colors pretty much throughout. But yeah, the story isn't great. As we said, it's not really a big deal when it comes to a Giallo movie. We don't tend to watch them for the story. Like the alternative title for this film, Six Women for the Murderer, like it pretty much sums up everything about Blood and Black Lace. It's just six women. We don't find out too much about them. We find out little bits here and there, but they're here to get murdered. If anything, the murderer is the main character, which is quite odd. When it comes to horror, slasher, Giallo, whatever. Like there is no real true main character in Blood and Black Lace, but the killer is kind of the closest thing we get to a main character.
Yeah, that's sort of the point of intrigue in the story, right?
Yeah.
So the world ranks this as the 2,470th best movie of all time.
It's respectable.
People like it. It's one ahead of that movie Monster, where Charlize Theron put on some makeup and won an award.
I'm curious, kind of where it ranks among Bava on that list in a way, because I feel like this is still. I don't think it's considered Bava's best, but I definitely think it was probably in his top 5.
You know what? That's a great question. The other thing I'll say is we don't get a chance on this podcast to talk about They Shoot Zombies list at all. Or much, but I figured I might as well give They Shoot Zombies some love since we're watching a horror movie.
And I know our next one will be pretty high on that list, if I remember correctly.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. This one is 168. So
okay.
Still pretty high. This is ahead of M as a horror film, which is obviously wrong. But I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong year. It's 177. There you go. 2 ahead of M. And so yeah, I think
it looks like sorry to interrupt. It looks like Blood and Black Lace is his highest ranked on They Shoot Pictures. His next closest one, his next closest one is 2669, and that's Bay of Blood.
Oh, see, I thought Bay of Blood and Black Sunday would have been higher.
Yeah.
But
sorry, Black Sunday's a little higher, I think.
Oh, sorry, I completely missed it. Yes, no. Sorry, you're right. It is much higher, 1,081. I completely missed that one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Black Sunday, then Blood and Black Lace, then Bay of Blood in that order.
Yeah, that's I can agree with that. That order actually.
But all of his are kind of grouped, like the let's see. Let me go back. So you've got Black Sunday, which is 1,000, and then after that, it starts with Blood and Black Lace at 2,400, but then after that, 2,600 is Bay of Blood, 2,800 is Whip in the Body. 3,100 is Kill Baby Kill.
That's a good one.
3,200 is Black Sabbath. So like 3,300 is Danger Diabolique. So like they're grouped, Like people watch a lot of his movies. Um, okay, so I'm going to talk about one more thing that's not my reaction to the movie because I feel like we're all going to be pretty similar in that. But this is probably the best time to talk about sort of roughly the origins of Giallo
Yeah.
films. So I hope I don't get this horribly wrong, but I'm just going to speak at a broad level because and that's where my understanding is. But for like from the 20s till maybe even modern day, but for sure like the 20s through the 70s, there was this weekly publication that came out, and the name in Italian was Giallo Mondadori. So I guess, and the reason they used the term yellow was that they literally had like a yellow cover, and there was these very pulpy kind of crime novels that came out. So that's people in Italy would have associated the color yellow with like crime and murder and mystery and all that. Like it was very much in the culture. So I feel like that's worth calling out. So when they started calling these movies jolly films or Giallo films, that was something where people would have probably resonated with that. I was trying to think of like an easy equivalent in English, but anyways, I think
I think the closest would be like when I was a kid, you go over to the grocery store and there'd be the purple romance novels, the little 10 cent. They were always purple. The
yeah,
romances.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if they started putting out a Daniel Steele movie, like nobody would need background on what that was.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. So yeah, and I think that there's some discussion on our chat on Reddit around how people just watch this movie for the women and for the murders. I don't know if that's totally fair though. Like I think that that's there for sure, and maybe that's a reason why some people watch this. But like, Baba's a highly skilled artist, right? And he's a very visual artist. Um, and I think I don't want to say too much. If you just look at other heroes in the genre, let me just say it that way. There's some similar critique of Argento films, right? He probably leans more into the style, but his movies are not big on story either necessarily. Um,
If anything, his films have too much story. I
Yeah,
think
like
I
he's
think
almost like he's overcome.
Argento goes the other way. He has too much story to the
yeah,
fact where like you should have cut half this shit out there.
yeah, yeah. That's true. That's what made. I know recently, Adam, you saw the night Evelyn comes out of the grave, right? Or the Red Queen,
No, the other one, the
the
Red
Red
Queen.
Queen.
I'll talk about that. That's what I'm going to talk about for my any other business later.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to give it away, but I mean, anyways, there's other entries in the genre where I think they focus more on story, and there's some really cool kind of unique takes in the genre. But Baba, this is like the origin, right? This is simple. This is like 80s punk rock versus 90s skate punk. By the time they got to 90s skate punk, there was like dueling guitars that were harmonizing over each other and fast drums and vocals that were like harmonizing over each other. And it was this kind of crazy experience. But in the early 80s, it was like a little bit more raw and like there was still good music in that, but it was just more simple. Like the genre hadn't been like evolved yet, right? And I think that's kind of how I feel about Blood and Black Lace. Like it's simple and it's well made, and like it did well, and it got people excited about the genre, and it was a new way of looking at kind of crime and murder mysteries, and I like it for that. I don't know, it's fun. I like this movie a lot.
Well,
Yeah, like it's important. Sorry.
No, you go, Adam. You're good.
I was just going to say, it's important to remember that, Mario Bava wasn't setting out to make a Giallo film because it didn't
Right.
exist. He was trying to tell a story that happens to be just about some women getting murdered and a very convoluted plot, but he wanted to tell it in a very visually appealing way. And
Right.
he does that, absolutely. It's an incredibly well directed film. It's very well paced. There's no pacing issues, which we'll talk about a little bit later with a different film. But it's very artful. It's very modern. It matches the fashion house. It's very fashionable. And it's
Yeah,
very
definitely.
stylish, and it's very modern the way he films this film. When you watch it and you sort of look at it, you think this seems like something out from like the late 70s. It doesn't seem like a 1964 movie, especially if you look at other films around that genre or around that time frame. You know, a lot of the non-Hollywood films would have been quite raw. You know, we're talking about like Goddard and stuff like that, or maybe the opposite way. If we look at something like Bergman, it would have been very theatrical based, whereas this feels very modern and very stylish. It's almost like if Antonioni made a Giallo movie, the way some of the camera movements and setups and stuff. So it's a very very well crafted and well made film. Again, I don't know how much slasher fan, like if you go into this film expecting a slasher movie, I think you might come away disappointed, not at the kills and the killer per se, because the killer itself, his getup is very cool, but maybe you might be put off by its artfulness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to disregard Jolly when you talk about slasher, because there is that like natural progression there. The thing that I think slasher did, and probably why its movement lasted probably longer, I would argue, was because it's almost like Jolly was like, okay, we're making Agatha Christie novels. We need to have
Right.
a compelling mystery. We need to have a twist, even if none of us are good at knowing how to do that or how to develop that or anything else, but this is what we need. And then, when slashers came about, it's like no one really cares. I mean, most of the time there is no mystery to a lot of slashers. I mean, there's exceptions like Friday the 13th, the first one, but generally you know who the killer is because the mystery isn't the point. And I'll agree with Chris. The kills aren't necessarily the point. It is for some franchises. We've talked about Friday 13th on here I don't know how many times. It's a big part of it. It's not the only part of it, but it's a big part. But it's the same thing with Jolly. There are going to be certain filmmakers who are much more into how to tell these type of stories very artfully. We're going to be talking about Argento here in a little bit, and Argento was a lot like that. He didn't want to do it in a simple way, even from like a camera standpoint, and that's what you can really appreciate. And it's kind of sucks to almost put it as this like style versus substance idea, because I guess the sense is the style is the substance. You got these filmmakers who just want to make something that looks cool and interesting and experiment a little bit, and the story is just kind of there in service of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the cool thing about the subgenre in general, is just to see how these filmmakers go about it. Because Bava is as much as he influences Argento, they're very distinct on how they look. Like you can tell the difference between a Bava and Argento film.
Well, yeah, if we're talking about the look of the film, I feel like we have to at least draw a little bit of attention onto Ubaldo Terzano. So he's the camera operator here, the cinematographer here. And he's a great example of somebody I think that's kind of behind the scenes, but once you start to look into his filmography, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense where this artistic capability came from. I'm sure a lot of it was obviously Bava as well, but he was the camera operator for Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion.
Okay.
For Lizard in a Woman's Skin, and then he did actually the Paul Morrissey movies, Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Deep Red. So there's a connection to a little spoiler there, but. So this is a guy who followed around a lot of the greats in Italian cinema and is very competent and capable, at framing and lighting design and a lot of the trademarks in those films that I mentioned. Like the camera work gets brought up quite often, right? So he's obviously got a very strong vision. And this movie, we've kind of talked about it in general, but I just want to zone in on that for a second, zoom in for a second. Like the way that these scenes are set up for me, it felt like okay, let's take for example the opening sequence with the way that the sign for the hotel kind of fell off, right? That could have been a Universal monster movie, right? It wound up
or something from Hammer or something like that.
Hammer, right? Like it wound up not being that, but I feel like that's why this movie to me it sort of transitions between like a lot of that classic horror that people would have seen on TV just on replay, or maybe the ones that they grew up going to the theaters to see. It sort of transitions into this like new era where you can be a little bit more gory, a little bit more grisly, right? Like a little bit more nasty. And I think it's important for that as well.
Blood can be a little less pink.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, I mean that's my I guess my big point there. I just feel like it's for me it's important to think when I think about this movie, I think about it as one of those like transition films, you know. And I think that's another reason why people like it so much because those films tend to be shocking when they come out, and then in retrospect, they're like not as shocking. Right? Like so.
Yeah, and I mean that's further you go with horror, that's always kind of going to always be the issue, right? Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't as shocking as it was in '74 and things like that, but if it's important and it does other things, it'll still stick around. It'll still be worth talking about. And that's really what Blood and Black Lace is. As much as we can discuss the story and that's kind of where we're at. Is it almost feels like you have to talk a little broadly about it because you're like we can't really dissect the story because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No.
And it's tough to do that.
I had forgotten who the killer even was.
Thank you. It wasn't just me, and I know it's been a while for me, but I can't remember who it is.
Like I was watching when I was rewatching, I was like, was it that person? Like, oh no, shit, she's been murdered, not her. I couldn't really put my finger on it, and then even like the last twist, I was like, oh, I forgot about that too. So it will just tell you sort of how inconsequential the plot is to a lot
Right.
of this, but it's still one of those films that you remember images from it. There's scenes that are particularly sort of ingrained, like when one of the girls gets her hand and her face put on that sort of burning that what you call it, that furnace. Or the I think my favorite scene in the whole film is that sort of early one where one of the girls is locked in the antique shop, and there's like the lights flashing and you sort of see the killer sort of creep around, and he pops up in the corner and stuff every now and again. She's trying to
Yeah.
escape. Really, really cool scene, visually stunning, and really tense. It is a genuinely tense scene. And that's the kind of scene that you'd see in a much more modern film, in like a 90s film or something, with the flashing lights and stuff like that. You wouldn't really associate that with horror of this era. So I think it's an incredibly influential film, as we've already said, for Giallo, for slasher, for horror in general, really. um and yeah, it was kind of ahead of its time.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, because I'm trying to think of what was horror in '64, because horror really changes in '68 with Night of the Living Dead. That changes an incredible amount. '64 is kind of I'm trying to sit here and think of what would be coming out in
Uh,
horror wise
Well,
around
I've
that
googled it
time.
here. I'll make your life easier, and I've googled it, and there actually is quite a lot of really interesting ones. So we actually get a couple of the Roger Corman,
Okay,
the Mask of the Red Death, which I
okay,
think visually you can really lump this in with Blood and Black Lace. Is a visually stunning horror film.
Yeah.
We also have another one, The Tomb of Lygia. That's another Roger Corman. The Gorgon, which is a Hammer film. Quaidan, which I brought up before. Ani Baba. So
Oh yeah. Hmm.
it seems like outside of the sort of mainstream US, like Hollywood, you're getting actually quite a lot of really interesting horror films. Even like The Last Man on Earth, another one with Vincent Price. So you get a lot of yeah, there's a lot of actually pretty decent films on this list here for 1964 in horror. A
And
lot of really well made ones.
one of H.G. Lewis's best movies, The 2000 Maniacs, came out that year as well. I know he's not in the same league as some of these classic directors, but 2000 Maniacs was great. Like it was a really good movie. Probably, I think it's his best or one of them, anyways.
Yeah.
it's almost like it's setting up for that. I guess it's kind of setting up the tee that whole golden new what is it called, new Hollywood movement, where you get these
Yeah.
people just kind of being a little experimental. And I mean they're kind of already showing that here, especially with color, like you mentioned. Red Death, I almost wonder if there was like new camera tech lens that these guys just really wanted to try out, and like, okay, maybe we can make colors pop better. I'm not sure, I'm speculating, but it almost seems that way with how much they're experimenting with that.
Yeah. Like there seems to be a common thread here of films that are sort of have a lot of color, and put a strong emphasis on reds and stuff like that as well. Quaidon is like that as well. That's a very visually stunning film, shot in color. Nani Baba is in black and white, saying, "Oh, Straight Jacket" with Joan Crawford. Have you guys seen that film?
I have not.
It's a William Castle. It's a good
I
film.
like William Castle. I'd watch that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Joan Crawford's is very fun in it. Would recommend. Yeah, I could agree. There probably is some experimentation when it comes to color, shooting color, especially from what I've seen here. There seems to be another. Have you guys seen Castle of Blood? That seems like it might
I've
be another.
seen it. It's been a while, but I've seen it.
Cool. Yeah, looks
Oh,
cool. Barbara
this is
Steele.
this is sorry. This is the year for At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul. Have y'all seen that?
I haven't.
No,
That Brazilian horror movie? Oh, it's great. Very.
I can't add it to my letterbox right now. I have to write it down.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. There's it's one of the old DVDs. We were talking about this a few episodes back. It's one of the old DVDs that came in a coffin. I think it was Fantoma, maybe. It doesn't matter. There's like a giant coffin, and there's 4 of these horror movies from Brazil in the 60s. I didn't realize that this was.
Oh, is this Coffin Joe?
I was about to ask.
Yeah.
Okay, because that was on my list of 1964 horror films, but I'd never. But now the poster just said Coffin Joe, but when I look under the poster, it does say At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul.
That's it.
Yeah, interesting. I'll have to look into it.
Because I was sitting here, I was like, what else is Brazilian at that point, like in that era? So I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Just a big gap, and then Bacurau 40 years later. No, sorry, fans in Brazil. I'm sure there's a lot of great movies in your history.
Yeah, there's definitely. We won't talk about Brazilian films, but there is one I know that gets quite a lot. Limite, or is that Argentinian?
No, the city. So 1 second.
Oh, City of God.
City of God. There we go.
Yeah. City of God.
That movie
That's
is
a great movie.
But there's one called Limit or Limite, or I don't know how to pronounce it. It's quite old. It's from like the 30s or something. But that's like considered like one of the great silent films of like outside of Hollywood and Europe and stuff. I know it's meant to be very surreal. So you actually might like it, Chris. It's meant to be quite surreal.
Sounds right up my alley.
Yeah. I'll send you a link to it once Letterboxd is working again. But anyway, sorry, we should probably get back to Blood and Black Lace. That was a nice detour, though. It does kind of back up that maybe Bava was following not necessarily a trend, but there was a lot of similarly minded filmmakers who were wanting to experiment with making horror films that were a little bit different than the norm. Because Mask of the Red Death can definitely fall into that category as well. It's a very visually striking film.
Yeah,
especially after this might just be me. I've always thought the 50s was kind of a low point when it comes to horror. Like you had Hammer, but that was
just about to say that.
It was so it was probably kind of nice for the 60s that because I mean you want to talk like we've talked about on here before. Night of the Hunter is very visually striking, but wasn't well regarded at its time. It almost makes you wonder if it would have been more well regarded in the mid 60s than it would in the mid 50s.
For sure, yeah.
Possibly, yeah, possibly. Well, I think Night of the Hunter was just kind of weird anyway, because it was coming towards the end of film noir. You could probably say the same thing if it was made 10 years earlier. It could have been really well regarded. So it was just in a weird gray area where noir was ending and horror wasn't really focused on that kind of stuff. It was more focused on, Dracula and the Mummy
and the Blob. We've talked about the Blob on here.
Oh, the Blob, of course, the Blob. How could I forget? How could I forget 40-year-old Steve McQueen playing a 17-year-old? I don't think he was actually 40.
See, if we were doing the pick thing, I would have picked Carrie for that one, since we could talk about 30-year-old Sissy Spacek playing Carrie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what there is to say about Blood and Black Lace, right?
I'm just trying to think. I can't think of anything else specifically because we can't really get into the plot because
I do want to note one mistake that I love in this movie that I noticed the first time I watched it was the bathtub kill. The woman is killed in the bathtub and he wants to make it look like a suicide. You can already see this like line of where it's supposed to be cut, and you can just tell he just like kind of traces it with the knife. I think it's
Oh,
great.
really?
Yeah, it's awesome.
I
There's a
didn't
few
catch
mistakes
that.
in there, and it's like that's kind of endearing because it was made for nothing.
Yeah,
He still
I
made
didn't
it look
catch
that
that.
good.
I didn't
Me
even
either.
catch it. So there you go.
It was never probably caught in the VHS era, not until there was a Blu-ray upgrade, 4K scan that people were like, wait a second.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when
People.
they're making it too, it's like nobody's gonna see it. It's fine.
Well,
Yeah,
to be fair, I didn't see it, so
Yeah.
it's probably they're probably right for the most part.
great. Well, fun discussion, y'all, on Blood and Black Lace. And actually, one of the things we touched on was this kind of transition between eras. And speaking of that, Severin just released a star who's been around, I think, in every era of horror. They released the second collection of Christopher Lee films they're putting out
Oh, nice.
called The Eurocrypt of Christopher Lee. This one ranges from 1962. No, I'm sorry, 1959, actually. Uncle Was a Vampire until all the way 1989, I believe. Yeah, with a movie called Murder Story. So it ranges, what is that, 60 to 80? This is basically 30 years, right? And
Yeah,
that's only probably a third of Christopher Lee's career. I feel
yeah.
like that guy he's been in literally everything. But this one has some great movies in it. So there's Uncle Was a Vampire, Secret of the Red Orchid, Dark Places, Dracula and Son, Murder Story, and then this just typical, Severin style. There's a lot of great special features. Sometimes they even have bonus films. I think at least one of the discs has a bonus film. So they're just, yeah, like, Severin is one of these companies that I actually kind of, I have this sickness maybe where I try to go complete on some labels. I don't do that for Severin. Um, their range of stuff they put out is kind of all over the place, and some of it I don't really enjoy that much. But I am definitely complete on their box sets, and I think I'll always be that way going forward. I just, not only are they good investments because they go crazy on the secondhand market when we go out of print, but honestly, they're just brilliant box sets. Like I really want to support them doing that more. Like the first Christopher Lee box set was amazing. They went and found some old TV shows that he had done and put them out on disc. I'm sure that something that would have never seen the light of day otherwise. And some of these movies are great and hard to find. And so, like, yeah, just kudos to them. They're Out of the Blue shipped. So I just got that shipped yesterday, actually. So I'll be getting their copy of Out of the Blue, another film that a lot of people said would never get a disc release, a physical release because of rights issues and stuff. And they I don't know how they did it. Maybe it's on the disc, maybe I'll have to find out, but they took the time to, get with the rights holders and get Dennis Hopper involved and get it out in the market. Um, so that, and then this second Christopher Lee comes out in June, I believe. So that'll be a little bit longer, but just very impressed with those folks. And then I didn't go crazy. I'm sure y'all will talk about this a little bit, but like this was like the last 2 weeks of sales. I feel like there was, everything had a sale. And I'll report that I was pretty restrained. I was proud of myself. I didn't dive into the Indicator sale at all because I already have a lot of the box sets that are in print from them. And have not done the Kino one. The
The Arrow
Vinegar
one will be
Syndrome.
right around the corner.
The what?
The Arrow one is going to be right around the corner. Their Easter sales they normally do, so that'll probably be
Yeah,
in the next couple of weeks.
yeah. I'll definitely get some of that. Get in on that. But Vinegar Syndrome didn't go crazy. So yeah. Anyways, I kind of sat this one out a little bit and tried to lick the wounds from an expensive February and March already. So, what about y'all?
Well, I didn't sit out of the Indicator sale. I did. I was good. I only bought one. I didn't buy any of their like single releases because the only ones I really want at the moment are their two Mexican movies, but obviously they weren't part of the sale because they're still so new. So I might wait till the next sale to pick those up. But I did pick up a box set as one of the few box sets they had in print that I didn't have. So I got this John Ford set, the John Ford at Columbia.
Yeah.
Very nice looking set. Films, I had heard of one of them, The Whole Town's Talking. I've heard of that one because it has Edward G. Robinson in it, and I love Edward G. Robinson. The other three are The Long Grey Line, Gideon's Day, and The Last Hurrah. Um, this will tell you all you need to know about me and Indicator box sets. I don't care about John Ford. I don't particularly like his movies. I've never heard of any of these movies, but I still bought this. That's all you need to know
The
about
mark of a
Indicator
true
box
collector.
sets.
I've never
That's all
heard
you
of
need.
this, but that's pretty cool.
I don't care about John Ford all that much. I'm not particularly affiliated with any of his movies. I've never heard of any of these, but the box set looked nice, so I bought it.
Yep.
I'm just curious, how do you feel about Searchers and My Darling Clementine and stuff like that?
I've never seen My Darling. I haven't actually seen a ton of John Ford. Let me just pull up his filmography.
My Darling Clementine is awesome. I know you asked Adam, but that movie caught me off guard. It's so good.
I have heard that one is good. Seen Stagecoach. I like that one. That was pretty good. It was kind of like a Hitchcock movie, but in a Western. Searchers. I was kind of disappointed by Searchers, maybe because it's so high. I watched it when I was going through trying to get through the Sight and Sound top 250, and it's like really high. It's in like the top 10 or top 20. So I was kind of disappointed by it. I thought it was good and it looked nice, but Jesus, it's racist.
Yeah, I think AFI has it as their top Western, if I remember correctly.
They probably
Yeah,
do.
I
Just
think
going
it
by
is.
its reputation, I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, I hate The Quiet Man.
I don't really care for that one either.
Yeah, I hate that film. I don't think I've seen any more. I'm just looking through his filmography here. I'm pretty sure those are the only ones I've seen.
I would say watch My Darling Clementine. Like,
yeah, I have.
I would
that
say
one
if you
is
can,
good.
I think you will like that one.
Yeah, I
I
think
can't
will.
speak for any on that box set. I've never watched any of them.
Yeah, like none of them seem like they're like westerns. Anyway, from like they all look to be like set in like the modern day. I think one of them's a war film. So I don't think any of them are westerns, which I don't not like westerns, but I'm not like a huge western guy, as you guys know. Anyway, but yeah, Stagecoach would be my favorite out of the three I've seen. But yeah, I'll try and get to My Darling Clementine at some
If
point.
it helps,
I have heard that's good.
If it helps, it's just like the first telling of the Tombstone story.
Never seen Tombstone.
Like the Wyatts and the
OK Corral.
Yeah.
Okay,
Corral.
I'll put this to you this way. Do you guys know who Cullen is? No, so why would I know who your American old heroes are?
Wait, no, okay, fair. But Tombstone was like a huge movie with like Kevin Costner and all them.
I know the poster.
Kurt
I know
Russell.
the poster, but the guys are walking down the dusty. I know the poster for Tombstone. They're all wearing their black. Yeah, but I have no idea what the Tombstone story is. I didn't even.
I guess that's interesting because I always thought it would be like Ned Kelly. Like people in America know who Ned Kelly is from Australia. Like he was a big outlaw. I guess they call him what? I don't want to say bushwhacker. I don't know if that they have a different name than outlaw, but like I thought maybe it would be like that, but I guess it's not.
Yeah, I've definitely seen this poster for Tombstone. Yeah, but
also watch Tombstone. It's a good. It's an movie.
The name Wyatt Earp sounds familiar, but I have no idea if he was a good guy, a bad guy. I have no idea what his story was. So no,
okay,
not.
That's interesting. Good to get that perspective from
seriously.
Yeah, it's cool.
Great Sam Elliott role too. Anyways, okay, what's
sorry.
What
would be Zach?
So I think I mentioned in the last one. I want to say I did. I'm blanking if I mentioned that I was getting that Godfather set, that 50th anniversary one. This thing is ginormous. I have to hold it like back here.
Oh shit!
But,
okay, that's bigger.
Yeah, it's a great set. I absolutely love it. The only thing I don't like about it is I wish companies would stop doing this. The stupid cardboard sleeves. Like this is or you have to pull it out like sideways and pray to God it doesn't scratch against the cardboard.
Oh,
I wish they'd stop doing that, but that's about my only real issue with it. Beyond, it's a great set. I really recommend it. I got it for lower than I think it's selling right now. I think it was like 106, and I would say it's worth that. I don't know if I'd pay 140 for it, which I think is what Amazon is selling for it now.
Jeez. Okay.
But for $100, I was like, good 3 movies with great transfers. I went ahead and looked through the transfers. They look great. I wish it was 7.1 audio, but I'll deal. it still sounds great. Lots of special features. They have 3 cuts of Godfather 3 because they cannot figure out how to make that movie good. They're still trying. But I love the set. If you can find it cheap, I'm sure it'll go down in price again. I'd recommend it for that price. Beyond that, the only other thing I have coming in is because taking my girlfriend towards, I guess it's the middle of the month, we're going to go see the new Fantastic Beasts 3 because I got to go buy the tickets pre-ordered for that. We're rewatching the Harry Potter movies. So I actually went ahead and bought like the Steelbook collection. And this is kind of one of those things of why I'm really big in telling people to go region free. So that set is sold out through Best Buy. You can't get it anymore unless you want to pay $350 for it.
Oh, wow.
Or you can order it from France for $80.
Oh, wow.
And it's the same thing. It's just the outside packaging is in French. And I'm like, you know what? To save $300, I think I can deal with some French.
Yeah.
But it's crazy that they can. That's how different it is. Best Buy sells out, and people will pay high dollar for it. And it's like, what is this? FNAC? I don't know if that's how you're actually supposed to say it. FNAC. That was the company that sold it for like $80.
Wow. Are you talking about the one where it's like it's sort of like this steelbook slide into individual slots?
It is.
And
Yep.
Like a big black box, is it? I'm just looking.
Yeah, big black box. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. There's it's £160 to order it from the Warner Brothers UK store. It's sold out on the Irish websites I've checked. So yeah, you probably got a good deal. Sounds like
I was like, it's just crazy to me to look at that, and I was like, it's weird. I was like, it makes me glad I'm region free because that almost pays for itself as many years as I've done it. But
right,
yeah, that's me justifying that expensive cost. So there you go. And I didn't order anything during the sale because I spent enough money.
right.
And I ordered from the last Kino sale, and I was like, I think I'm good for a little while. All right, and welcome back. We're now going to be talking about our second feature film. This was picked by Chris himself. We're going to be talking about Dario Argento's Deep Red. I'm not going to say the other title, but it is about a jazz pianist and a wisecracking journalist are pulled into a complex web of mystery after the former witnesses the brutal murder of a psychic. And before we get started, I just really wanted to put this funny thing that I think is hilarious about the poster. The poster's pretty iconic. It's got the hanging doll and it's got the mummified corpse. But I love that it says something. Let me get it. When was the last time you were really scared? Psycho, The Exorcist, Jaws. Now there's Deep Red. And I think that's great because Jaws came out the same exact year. So what is that really saying? When was the last time you were scared? 3 months ago?
Last week.
Yeah. But Adam, I know you've seen both the English and the Italian, right?
Yeah, I watched both cuts. So similar, I actually probably watched Deep Red around the same time I first watched Blood and Black Lace when I was kind of getting into Giallo. And I watched the English cut that time, and I didn't care about the movie all that much. I'd seen Bird of the Crystal Plumage like within a few days prior. I was really going on like a run that week. And I preferred Bird of Crystal Plumage. I watched the Italian version this time because I had read that it does make a bit more sense. They did cut some stuff out of the English version. They cut a bit more of the violence out of the English version, as well as some of the scenes where David Hemmings and Darian Nicolodi's character, had a bit more sort of comedic moments together, a bit more jokes and a bit more playfulness. And those were kind of cut out of the English version as well. So I decided to watch the Italian version this time around. I still don't really get what happens in some parts of the movie. I was hoping it would open up more doors, especially that whole subplot with the villa. I still don't really get what the whole point of that was. I was hoping this would open, give me more answers to that. It didn't. I still don't like it as much as Bird of Crystal Plumage, which I do need to rewatch. I didn't get a chance to rewatch it with this. And I think Blood and Black Lace have probably jumped above Deep Red, but like Blood and Black Lace, I've gained a much better appreciation for it the second time around than I did the first time. So I'll kind of hold it up there for now.
What about you, Chris?
Well, so quick, this movie is very highly regarded. So it's in the top 1,000 on They Shoot Pictures at 983.
Nice. That's good.
Right next one down, or next one up, I guess, closer to number one is that film Giant from the 50s.
It's in with Nicholas Ray, isn't it?
It's actually George Stevens. Let's see if Nicholas Ray's maybe.
Oh no, I think I'm mixing up. It's because the guy who's in Rebel. Who's the guy who's in Rebel Without a Cause?
James Dean.
Yeah, I think he's in Giant. Maybe
Yeah,
that's why I've mixed it up.
Yeah. Then on They Shoot Zombies list, getting to talk about this list for the second time is exciting. This film is all the way up at 48.
Very respectful.
I forgot that's a little bit lower than I was actually assuming. I was
gonna think top 30. Yeah. So
I guess Suspiria is his highest.
I would
imagine
too. Yeah.
I have to believe that's true.
Even though Suspiria is not my favorite, but I assume it's
just for context. I forgot where Blood and Black Lace was on the Zombies one. Was that above or below?
130, 100 and
177.
Yeah.
Okay, way below. Okay, thank you.
But I was trying to think of, this movie is like, it's interesting, right? Because it was shot in, I just lost the year, 1975. Mm-hmm. And like, there was a lot of, some of the campiness in this movie. I don't want to give away, I guess, I won't talk about the ending, but some of the way certain scenes were shot and some of the way that the campiness was handled in this movie, it feels like an 80s film, right? So it's kind of like, I think like, especially, so hard not to talk about the last scene to make
feels like Tenebrae. Like Tenebrae is definitely like,
that's like,
they don't feel that far apart, but they were made a pretty decent amount of time apart.
Yeah. And Tenebrae is very wild and weird.
Yeah, I think that might be my favorite film from him, but anyways, I think Deep Red for me is like I don't really quite get why it's the 48 best horror movie of all time and in the top 1,000 of best films of all time. Like, there's so much buzz around the movie. Like, the Goblin soundtrack was a massive seller, right? It's a cool use of jazz.
Just say you don't like it, Chris. Just say it. You can say it. It's okay.
No, I'm not shy to say that. I was watching it this time trying to figure out like what all the hype was about. That was kind of my lens to like, as on my rewatch this time, and it didn't really resonate with me the way that I kind of wanted it to. I think this is going to be a middle of the road Argento film for me. Like, it has some cool styling. It's very unique. I like the music to it, even though at times it feels a bit random. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't love it, I guess. What about you, Zach?
I'll try to put a little insight in here. This isn't my favorite Argento. That's still opera, because I think the plot in opera is better. I think it's a lot more streamlined. But I do like this film a lot, and I think why so many people are attracted to it. I'll at least give my perspective and see if that maybe helps. This was the first Giallo film I ever saw. Like, I would have had to have been in high school the first time I saw it, and it almost feels like it opens up this weird world for you. And I think for a lot of people, it is their first one. Like, I don't know if Sergio Martino or Mario Bava are ever going to be the best pure introductions to what Giallo can be, but Deep Red is. Like, it's got this overly convoluted plot. It's got this really unique camera work from Argento, which I think can easily be taken for granted now because we've seen it from him for 30, 40 years now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's incredibly inventive. And, as far as mysteries go, it's probably one of the stronger ones in Giallo, which says a lot about the genre and how it makes mysteries, but it's mostly coherent. Like, I can tell you what happens. I can tell you who the killer is, and I can tell you the first time when they first reveal the killer. I'm not going to get into spoilers just in case.
I was going to say, did you look out? Did you look out for it? I looked out.
Yeah, I did. I was interested, and then the whole time, like when they finally give the first reveal, we'll say, I was like, that doesn't make sense. And I was like, and I remember thinking that. And when I forgot about it years later, when I rewatched it, I was like, this still doesn't make sense. And I'm like, oh, because I'm actually paying attention. I don't like so good. It wasn't just the Dario Argento's like, who cares that this doesn't make sense? It's a Giallo film. There is something there, and it's not great, but it makes it a little bit more fun. So I think it's more accessible, if that makes sense. Like it's just a more accessible Giallo film. Like it's not going to be Martino or Bava. It's going to be Argento was I would say most people's introduction to the subgenre.
Yeah.
Yeah, Argento in general was definitely mine. Trying to remember if it was Suspiria or opera. I think opera might have some of my favorite visuals too in terms of horror, like the
That
not
high
to be
stuff,
a
man, gets to you.
yeah.
not to be a curmudgeon, but Suspiria technically isn't a giallo.
Oh, here we go. That's all.
Not
This
to-
is how we're going to spend 2 hours on the podcast.
Determining what the fine line of what is and isn't giallo. The purists
It's not
would say
about
that
a killer.
Yeah, the purists would say that Suspiria is not a giallo movie. But I would still call it as well. That's probably
Yeah,
my
I mean,
first
when somebody says, "What is Suspiria?" If I say it's a witch movie, I don't think that properly prepares people for what it is. But if I say it's a Giallo film, they'd be like, "Okay, I get what you're going for."
supernatural horror film.
Yeah, like it's it's just
We're
a
not
good
here talking
descriptor.
about that overrated movie anyway, so.
Oh, I'm not the only one who isn't in love with Suspiria. That's cool.
Oh, it's super overrated. That film boring as fuck.
Looks so good, and that's the thing that kills me. Like I told somebody one time, and I won't get off topic too much. I was like, if I could be in a room with literally no distractions, I would probably fall in love with Suspiria. But the littlest thing distracts me, and I fall out of it. Like it feels like it takes me forever to get back into it. Like I'll hear my cat do something, I'm like, oh yeah, it's like it breaks this illusion for Suspiria, and I'm like, it's like I just have to be in like this soundproof room with no distractions, and I will probably love the movie to death.
There was I guess one of the things that you said just now, that this was like a well-constructed mystery. So he teamed up with this guy named Bernardino Zapponi, I did a double take when I saw that name because he did a lot of movies with Fellini.
Mm-hmm.
He was a novelist, and he wrote. He was a writer on Satyricon, Clowns, Roma, Casanova, and City of Women, at least, if not a few more, maybe. And all of there's a common thread in all of those where it's that period in Fellini's career where he kind of went into like really leaned into the surrealism and started to tell more convoluted stories. I that's my favorite period of Fellini's career, but it's very far cry from the neorealism kind of roots. And I think I don't know how that plays into this necessarily, but it's interesting. Like when I saw that name, I'm kind of rethinking about this movie now from the perspective of being like co-written by a novelist, because I could kind of see that making sense a little bit. Like it does try to make the story like grand, right? And like with the leitmotif of the music that kind of runs through.
Yeah, I think the story itself is more novelistic. I think if this was written as a novel, it would probably come across, I'm talking purely story-wise, the story would probably come across easier to follow, if it wasn't in a novel form.
Right.
So I guess that kind of makes a bit more sense now that you mentioned this guy. Yeah, but in terms of this film, obviously, look, this film is basically Bird of the Crystal Plumage Part 2. It's the same idea. Dude witnesses a murder, can't quite shake that he's missing something, and he tries to figure that out all while the killer is hunting them down. It's the same film, but the exact same sort of structure, and even includes a mid-film sojourn to a random house that doesn't actually really matter when it comes to
and it probably would in a novel, like you were kind of mentioning. Like the villa would be a cool red herring to go into a different setting, but it feels weird in the movie.
It does. It's the same thing happens in Bird Crystal Plumage when he goes out to that like big country house,
Mhm.
where the artist lives. It doesn't actually matter for like the whole film, the whole plot. If you take that whole sequence out, it doesn't change anything that we've learned until now. If anything, the villa was just a means to get Mark to the school where the killer is sort of hanging out for some reason. I'm not gonna try and explain the ins and outs of plot semantics when it comes to Deep Red. Oh, aside from the horror stuff and the plot and everything like that, there's one aspect of Deep Red that's super interesting and super kind of unexpected. And that's the way that Argento sort of talks about gender politics and homosexuality. There are two aspects of the film that you wouldn't really expect to see. Again, they don't add a ton, to the overall plot. You can again easily strip them all out, and it doesn't really change anything. So, by having that, specific want to include these scenes, I think is very interesting. The character that Dario Nicolodi plays, like she essentially is always like just ahead of the game. Like she's completely, she's clearly much more intelligent than David Hemming's character Mark. She's a journalist. She has intuition. She follows clues. She's clearly the sort of more intelligent of the two. But then he has that weird little tiff where he's like, remember that part where he's like giving out about empowered women.
Mhm.
It's just a really weird scene, to include in your horror movie. Again, you could take it out and it doesn't change the context of anything. So, and the fact that was Argento's wife as well.
Right.
You feel like he's trying to empower her or something, by including that scene where she talks about this. Like he's wanting his wife to, be a strong, independent woman. And then obviously you have Mark's friend who's gay, but it's never really shown. Like obviously the character himself's a bit of an alcoholic and a bit of a sad sack, but like the actual homosexuality aspect is never shown in a disparaging light really at all. Obviously
No.
he grapples with that. His boyfriend, I suppose, maybe is feminized quite a bit, but that's just some people, some gay people are just like that. That's just maybe who he is. It's not completely out of line for Argento to film maybe a gay man and maybe a bit more feminine, because I'm sure there is plenty of gay men who are a bit more feminine. um so yeah, I don't think any of the homosexuality stuff is disparaging or insulting at all to that community, which is it's refreshing to see in a 70s horror film. I don't know too much about Italian society, in terms of how liberal they were or anything like that, but if this film's anything to go by with its sort of use of empowered women, and obviously its depiction of homosexuality, my assumption would be that it was quite liberal, or maybe Argento was pushing the envelope. I'm not really too sure, but it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting part of the film that's sort of completely aside from the murders and the mysteries.
And I think that's what kind of helps Deep Red, is it does feel like that part of that's just world building. Like it's building
Yeah,
this little, I don't know if you want to call it a city block that, where all this mystery is sort of taking place, but stuff like that really helps. Like, see, and that's kind of the big difference between here and Blood and Black Lace. As much as both of them have this sort of style to them, we can actually talk about the characters and the characterization and the story. And there's meat there to grab onto, even if it's not like super deep or and it's not a lot to grab onto. It's something. And I think that is part of what set Argento, why he was a big part of the Giallo movement, was just because he could at least recognize that stuff was needed for something, something
yeah.
to
You
do.
feel like the audiences would have a lot more fun with this or Bird with Crystal Plumage than they would with Blood and Black Lace. General audiences I'm talking about, just general cinema goers, they would find something like this more entertaining than Blood and Black Lace, because obviously Blood and Black Lace puts all its emphasis on the craft and the artfulness, whereas, not to say that Deep Red isn't artful, there's a lot of excellent filmmaking here. But it also has deep characters. It has a very over rich plot. Over rich plot is the best way to put it. There's a lot going on. There's a lot, as you said, Zach. There's a lot of meat on the bone for an audience to chew on, and obviously the kills are super intense as well. Especially
that puppet's
the one
great. I love that puppet.
The puppet,
Yeah.
puppet is insane. That's just Argento must have been on drugs for that part. Must have been. There is no other logical explanation. Argento was on drugs for whenever he decided to make that puppet scene. But then there's also that scene that Rick Rosenthal kind of used then in Halloween 2 with the author of that weird book, when the killer goes, there's the same, that's that kill from Halloween 2 with the really hot bath,
Yes, you're right. Yep.
That happens in Deep Red as well. Pretty much the exact same murder, literally, the woman sort of being drowned in the extremely hot bath, and you see her face kind of melting off a little bit with the heat. So obviously Deep Red is just as influential to slasher and horror as Blood and Black Lace was, due to the fact that they literally Halloween 2 literally took one of their murders entirely and reused it.
Which, speaking of influences, Adam, you brought this up to us while you were watching. You're the music guy here.
Yeah,
so I want to hear this music stuff.
I really like the main theme music of Deep Red. I was like, this is really groovy. It really is really nice. So afterwards, I got on my computer and I was like looking up the tabs, so I could learn to play it on guitar because it was really cool. And I was playing it, and I made a couple of mistakes, and then next thing I knew, I was playing Street Spirit by Radiohead, and I'm like, wait. This is Street Spirit. What have Radiohead done? And honestly, I wouldn't obviously that, aside from their literal copyright issues, where with Creep, where they were actually brought to court, there is a lot of moments in Radiohead's music where they wear their influences on their sleeve, especially their jazz influences and stuff at some points. But I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if this score did influence them when writing that chord progression for Street Spirit. And because obviously we would assume that Tom York is aware of Giallo and Argento movies, because obviously he did the score for the remake of Suspiria.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So it'd be very surprising if he had never seen an Argento movie before, So
I'm gonna love that defense if it ever comes out. He's like, I've never heard of Argento.
Tom. So look, Tom, if you're listening, I love you and you're a friend of the podcast, but just you can admit it. We know it's okay. We know.
It's a banger score. We understand.
But it is, yeah. No, and I think we kind of. I didn't get to say this earlier when we were talking about Blood and Black Lace, just in terms of you mentioned that you can tell a film is an Argento film by the way you're looking at it and stuff. You can also tell a film is an Argento film without looking at it, just by listening to it. Because you'll hear Goblin. Goblin have that they're very, very iconic sort of prog rock sound. And I'm just kind of curious actually. Was Argento ever in Goblin? Because wasn't there an Argento film where the score was done by Dario Argento and the Goblins? Is that Dawn of the Dead?
Well, yeah, they have one of the cuts of Dawn of the Dead uses the Goblin soundtrack that they made for Italy. I don't know if I'd had to look and see if he was involved in that though.
But I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure it's actually credited as Dario Argento and the Goblins. So I just always wondered if he was in Goblin and then he left when he went into filmmaking, but still commissioned them to make music for him.
Let's see. I'm looking it up to see if I can figure it out, because usually they'll give you past band members. See, they just put an associated acts, Dario Argento, and I'm like, that's true, I guess.
Maybe I'm misremembering. I could also be very wrong. Maybe I'm
Well, I mean, he
misremembering.
did edit that version of Dawn of the Dead too. It was his
Yeah.
edit. So where he took out
Yeah.
all the character development and said, "You don't need all that."
Yeah, it's interesting. He went from Ennio Morricone on Bird of Crystal Plumage, and then just a few years later, he got this in the Goblin. But the Morricone scores in Plumage is also pretty jazzy and pretty cool. He seemed to just really like jazz, I guess, which and then maybe, as you said, he got a little more into prog rock as the movies went on. But
And apparently, they were called Cherry Five before Deep Red.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any. I think I might have just made that up.
I was curious because I mean, I wouldn't doubt he has like some knowledge of music because I mean, he obviously cares a lot about it. So I wouldn't have doubted it. I just couldn't. Wasn't sure.
I honestly think I made it up because I've even just Googled Dario Argento and the Goblins and nothing really comes up except for like the main Goblin page. So maybe I made it up. Maybe it was just a part of a dream or something. There we go.
Candy Colored Nightmare.
A candy colored nightmare I had, exactly. That is bizarre. That's gonna annoy me. It's gonna annoy the crap out of me.
Next, you'll see on the website that Adam has went on a Dario Argento binge.
Just to find, I only have to watch the opening credits. It's great. It's easy.
Immediately cuts it off. Next one.
I'm certain it's in the version of whatever version that Shudder has of Dawn of the Dead. I'm certain.
When I get some time today, I will pull my Dawn of the Dead out and I will check for you.
Oh, you don't have time.
There's a CD in that case.
I'm logging into Shudder.
Getting into the serious issues here.
Yeah.
Continue talking about the other things while I figure this out.
Yeah, I don't really have too much else to say, to be honest. I think that, this one to me has that vibe where a lot of 80s slasher films where, like, as you meet this creepy family, you start to realize a little bit more about what happened with the murder, why it happened.
Yeah.
It's a common kind of trope in a lot of 80s movies. And I think this one certainly, is, I don't know if it's the earliest example of that. I mean, I guess Psycho, you could argue, is a pretty messed up family. That's not really but yeah, it's more, I'm more thinking about kind of like, there's this idea that you do like a flashback to a family and you learn about something that's important to them, like the future story. That's a very common thing in a lot of slasher movies. And this one, I feel like, is maybe the earliest I remember that specific kind of like structure.
Yeah, and I really like how they did it during the credits. I really like how they did that. And it's going to sound bad, as a film lover, but I was like, I've never watched a film with the commentary on. And I said, okay, well, look, I've seen Deep Red. I know what it's about. I'm going to watch this with the commentary on. And I got about 5 minutes into the film and I was like, I wish this dude would shut the fuck up so I can watch the movie. So I turned it off. But he made a really good point during the opening credits, when the music kind of fades out and it switches into that weird sort of lullaby, and it shows the flashback, and then the normal theme fades back in. It's like a psychic vision. The way it sort of fades in and it happens to you, and then it fades out again. It is like one of the visions that the psychic that gets murdered. It's like one of the ones that she has. So in the 5 minutes of commentary that I watched, that was a really interesting tidbit that I got from it. And I probably would have got more if I had managed to sit through it. See, I didn't realize that when you listen to commentaries, you don't get to hear like what's going on in the movie.
They're all different.
Yeah, okay. Some you can, some you can't.
Because I was watching it and I'm like, okay, like I still want to hear the dialogue, dude.
I wonder if it's because Italians dub so much that they just maybe. It would be too hard to do it on the track.
This was the Italian version that he would have been talking over rather than the English one. So that's certainly possible.
If you ever want to dip your toe back into commentary waters, sometimes I put the English subtitles on so I can at least kind of follow the story a little bit. There's not as quite as exciting, but there's a little trick for you.
See, I think I would have to do it with a film that like I know it inside and out. So, like with Deep Red, it's been a year or so since I've seen it. So, I did actually want to watch it. Now, I found it. Sorry, I'm sorry to overcut myself. I have Dawn of the Dead running beside me. Original soundtrack, The Goblins with Dario Argento.
Okay,
So,
I just was going to tell you, I have looked through the entire box set and I could not find anything.
I'm literally looking at it right as I had it. I had it playing on mute beside me on a different tab. The Goblins. So it is not Goblin. It's The Goblins with Dario Argento. So I'm just gonna screenshot this so you guys don't think I'm crazy.
You can link it in the description,
and I will put it in. I'll put it in our Discord for you to see as well. Anyway, sorry to get back to what I was talking about. I would need to watch a film I've seen like a bunch of times. Like I could do it with like Vertigo or something, or Night of the Hunter, or Halloween, or Blade Runner.
Listen to the Halloween one. It has John Carpenter and Jamie Lee Curtis, and she's scared to death of horror movies, and she has to watch it. Yeah, she doesn't like horror movies. So they rip off each other really well. It's an enjoyable commentary.
Yeah, see, I could watch a commentary with those films because I've seen them so many times. I know everything that happens. Whereas with Deep Red, it was only my second time seeing it. I had kind of forgotten bits and pieces here and there. I did actually want to rewatch the movie, rather than just listen to some Danish dude tell me all about it.
Tell you how great the movie is.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because there's really like two really main types of commentaries. If you I'm going to say three. There's usually the director with a couple cast members who are talking about it. Then you have the historical guys who will come in and they'll just give the history of it. And then you'll get random ones on some of them, which are just the crew. You'll have like cinematographer, you'll have the sound guy, you'll have the stunt guy, and they'll just be talking about like the technicals and stuff. So it really depends on what you're looking for. And then you'll get these movies that have like all of them. They'll have 8 different tracks, and you can just
see, like I definitely like the scholar ones would appeal to me more, especially after reading the Truffaut Hitchcock book, where like Truffaut tries to get like really intellectual answers out of Hitchcock, and Hitchcock's like, "Oh, we just did this because it was cheap and easy."
It's so great.
Then you'll love Carpenter's. That's pretty much his entire comedy.
It's just like, for fuck's sake, Hitchcock, people want to put you on this intellectual pedestal, and you're just like, no, I didn't mean any of this. Especially when it comes to like straight. I remember like reading The Strangers on a Train part, and I was flabbergasted when he was like, I didn't really like Harley Granger in the lead role. And I'm like, but like that's what adds the whole homosexual subtext to this. It actually makes
Hitchcock
this film really
like
interesting.
Actors. That every movie I read, he's like, Jimmy Stewart was bad for this movie, so I never rehired him. She wasn't good, and I'm like, we're talking about Vertigo.
Except he seems to always think that like Cary Grant probably would have been good in this. If you brought it up a few times, like Cary Grant probably would have been good in this, except for Notorious, where he was like, I probably wouldn't have cast Cary Grant in this again.
He has to specify, like, not this one.
Yeah.
Funny.
Cary Grant, yes or no? No on this, yes on this. All the ones that Cary Grant was in, he didn't want him. And all the ones he wasn't in, he was like, yeah, I probably could have had Cary Grant in here.
Like, if I read an interview that said he didn't think Anthony Perkins was good as Norman Bates, I wouldn't even be shocked. I'd be like, oh, okay. That doesn't sounds right.
Yeah, I wanted someone more masculine. I genuinely... Cary Grant would have been great in this. I needed a Vince Vaughn type for this movie. Vince Vaughn type would have been better.
Oh my gosh. Yo, Dario Argento is still directing. Sorry.
Yeah, Dark Glasses comes out. I want to see it. I'm hopeful. Like, please.
I don't think I've seen any of his movies that weren't made in the 80s onwards. I think Tenebrae is like the most recent one I've seen.
He has a rough output.
Yeah, I assumed as much. Didn't he direct his daughter in a sex scene?
Yeah, Dracula 2000. 2000. Yeah, they're 3D. It's Dracula 3D. I'm sorry. There's so many that came out in the 90s, but yeah, he filmed Asia.
Okay, I'm not going to watch that one. Yeah, I'm not going to watch that one. I probably won't watch any of them that Arrow don't put out. I don't trust the rest.
He has a movie called Giallo, which is completely awful, that he made in the 2000s.
Was it just like he's trying to bring back a Giallo?
Yeah, and I mean, he's doing that with Dark Glasses, but at least Dark Glasses looks okay. I hope it's okay. But yeah, Argento's kind of the last leg in that era. Like he's it.
It's funny because obviously he popularized that. We know he talked about Blood and Black Lace setting the foundations for it for what would come later. But it's funny to see like he's still kind of championing the genre that he popularized. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's you look at the '70s guys and '80s guys, and you're like, they've all either retired or died, and it's like I was like, that's why I'm like desperate for it to be good. I was like, just one more, and it'll be a nice closeout of that era.
Him and Woody Allen.
What was that?
Him and Woody Allen are still making movies.
Yeah, I forgot Woody Allen still makes movies.
I was just going to look up how old Argento is. Jeez, yeah, he's 81, he'll be 82 this year. So hopefully he'll have a good swan song.
It'd be nice. I mean, because even like, Romero just kind of got his swan song 5 years after he passed, where, he finally had that movie released. And
so late career Kurosawa put out that movie called Dreams. I wonder if Argento would ever make a movie called Argento's Dreams. I think
I would be for it.
I wouldn't want to see what the fuck he dreams.
I think you saw it for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be depraved. So, like always, we're ending this podcast with any other business, just a part where we like to talk about a film we've seen recently, give it a shout out. Obviously, doesn't have to be part of the Criterion channel. Doesn't even have to be particularly good. Just something that we saw, we liked, and we think, let's give this a quick shout out. I'll just get mine out of the way first. I'm going to stick with the Giallo team of this episode. I'm going to talk about a Giallo that I watched last week. Or was it earlier this week? I don't remember. I watched it very recently. And it was called The Red Queen Kills 7 Times. That's a proper Giallo title. Yeah. Blood and Black Lace and Deep Red are tame compared to The Red Queen Kills 7 Times. It came out before Deep Red. It's from 1972. So it's from the original sort of craze after Bird of the Crystal Plumage. And it's a super, super interesting film. Arrow put out a copy of it, and it's streaming on the Arrow player. It's where I watched it. Really amazing film. Honestly, like sort of thinking about it afterwards, it might be like my favorite Giallo of all of them. What have you done with Solange, or what have you done to Solange might run it close, but The Red Queen Kills 7 Times is a really interesting film. It's a very manic film. And what I mean by that is it's very much a film of 2 distinct styles that jump back and forth. There's no like part 1 and part 2 or anything like that. It very much jumps between these 2 very distinct aesthetics. So the brunt of the film sort of takes place at this castle. It's set in Germany, takes place at this sort of old style castle where this curse about the Red Queen who kills 7 victims, and the 7th victim is always their sister. So a lot of it takes place at this castle, but then also a good chunk of the film just takes place in the city that the castle is based in. So when everything's set in the castle, everything's very gothic and gloomy, very Hammer style, really, really interesting, almost even sort of like Roger Corman-esque with his Edgar Allan Poe films. And then you go to the city scenes, and it's very modern. It's very, very sort of cut off. A lot of again, I'm going to talk about Antonioni because it felt kind of like. Have you guys seen Blow Up?
No,
not Blow Up. Blow Out. Have you seen Blow Out?
Uh-uh.
All right, Blowout is a really good film by Antonioni. I think it was pretty sure it's his first English language film, and coincidentally stars David Hemmings from Deep Red. He was also the main character in Blowout. No, Blow Up. Is it Blow Up or Blowout? Which is the Brian De Palma one?
Blowout is the Brian De Palma, because Blowout's what you hear, and Blow Up is the like
blow up. He blows up the picture. Okay, because I was thinking of he blew up the tire, but that makes more sense. Yeah. So Blow Up is very, very sort of striking film, and kind of keeps you at arm's length, if that makes sense. And I feel like The Red Queen Kills 7 Times does that a lot as well in its more sort of city settings. So it's a really good film. Unlike the other Giallos we've talked about today, the story is super strong, has a really cool story, really cool plot. The characters are largely fleshed out. The main character, I have a crush on that actress. She's awesome. Yeah, it's just a really, really good film. I'd never heard of the filmmaker Emilio Miraglia. He didn't really make anything more than this, except for a film prior, which kind of like Birds of the Crystal Plumage and Deep Red. There's kind of like a similarity between them. Um, Chris, you mentioned it earlier. The night Evelyn came out of the grave. Um, the reason why, just kind of, yeah, great title. In the Red Queen kills 7 times. They suspect that the murderer is called Eveline, and that she also comes out of her grave. So you can see that there's sort of a similarity there, between the two films. But yeah, the Red Queen kills 7 times. It's on the Arrow Player. It is definitely in Ireland. Is it on the Arrow Player in the US? I'm not sure.
I think
But
it
our
was when we were checking. When I was checking earlier.
Okay, but yeah, if you get a chance to watch it, it's a really, really cool Giallo film. Like I said, it's probably my favorite of the genre because there's actually a story to go on, and the kills are also super cool as well. So yeah, that's mine. That's mine
Yeah, it's
anyway.
on there.
Nice. So yeah, if you're in the US or you're in Ireland like me or in the UK, if you want to kill 90 odd minutes and watch a cool film, there's lots of really nice visuals and a good story. Yeah, the Red Queen kills 7 times. Check it out.
Good use of the word kill. Well, I'm happy to go next. So I guess sticking in the horror genre at least, there is a movie that came out of Uruguay 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. I can't tell. Different websites have a different release date for it, but it's called The Last Matinee, and it's about this urban legend. I think it's a little hard to tell. I even watched a special feature about the making of the movie, and it kind of gets into like the folklore a little bit around this hooded, like cloaked gentleman who walked into a movie theater in 1993 in Montevideo and just killed a bunch of people, and that, so it's like about that murder. I'm pretty sure it was real. It's really hard to tell the way they did it. Like it could also be kind of like not a mockumentary, but that style where it's like so close to reality, but it's fiction. Anyways, the movie itself there's zero backstory. We don't learn anything about who the killer is. We don't learn anything about the motives of anybody. It's just killer walks into a theater, shit goes down, people start dying, and people start defending themselves against this killer. And it's enough. Like, the movie's awesome. It's the only thing I'll say is like kind of warning if you're triggered by gore, because there's like a lot of gore in the movie. Like, they did not pull any punches. Like, there's one scene where he has to cut his eyeball out, and it like extends as he like pulls it out of his head and like cuts the ocular nerve. Like, it's a great horror movie. It's gruesome, and Zach, I was thinking of you when I was watching this. Like, I feel like I'd love to talk to you about it when you get a chance to see it. It's just
Is it on?
hmm?
What's it on? Is there anything it's streaming on? You said
Maybe it's on. It's from Dark Star Pictures, the one of the Vinegar Syndrome partner labels.
okay.
According to Wikipedia, it's on video on demand, so I'm sure you could find it somewhere.
I'm sure it's streaming somewhere. Yeah. It's just a throwback to the slasher movie, and like it's within that genre. It's very gory, so it's a fun watch. Sounds weird to say, but very. It's the way they did the kills is kind of unique, and they use sound effects really well. So you like really kind of feel them, and it's just like you actually do kind of like shudder or kind of like ugh, every time it happens, which is it's hard to always get that reaction. So
Yeah,
that's
I'll check it out here soon. It's been on my list for a bit, so probably time to check it out.
yeah. What about you? What have you seen?
Well, with all this murder and sex maniacs, I think we need a little bit of good Christian film in here. And I want to talk about the magnificent film I watched yesterday called Old Fashioned.
Okay.
It is not good, not at all. From what I can understand about it, it was made around the time 50 Shades of Grey was getting a lot of popularity. So it was like this idea that men should be chivalrous, but what it actually comes out to is basically the main character. The movie would be more interesting, honestly, if he was a serial killer, because he has no personality. He's not charming, but he's like a 45-year-old guy who's like renting out the above area of his shop. Like he's an antique maker that's called Old Fashions, and take a shot for the title of the movie being said. And when he allows tenant to come in, she's like 30, so she's like 15 years younger than he is. And she came because she had her boyfriend broke her hand because she wore the wrong color of nail polish, something that's, I'm gonna guess, that is just a weird thing to happen. So she moves out here, and when she goes into the apartment to see his apartment that he owns, he won't go in there because it's this idea that he promises he'll never be alone with a woman unless it's his wife. And it's like, no, that is what a rapist says. Like, this is not charming. And that's how the whole movie comes off. It's terrible. It's completely awful, and it's so enjoyable to watch and how cringy it is. So I will recommend it. It's on Peacock. If you really want some bad, like, pure flicks films, that's one to go with.
Hard pass. And just so in case you're interested, The Last Matinee is streaming on Shudder and the Arrow Player.
Oh, perfect.
So I just looked it up, and that is for the US. I changed my Just Watch location just to look that up, just for you.
And if anybody's wondering why I picked this, you can blame Letterboxd, because I couldn't look up what I had watched this week, and that was the last thing I watched.
You're forced into talking about that film.
I was sitting here looking on my shelf, like, if I watched anything on here that I can talk about, I was like, I don't see anything. So